Taseki is taken to the leader of Harian, Danica. Danica and the Special Forces interrogate Kaseki to find if he is involved with the Quellist rebellion. Carrera is adamant that Taseki is one of the rebellion, and he had murdered the Meths as part of their grand scheme to bring chaos in Harlan. Danica, on the other hand, doesn't believe that Taseki has anything to do with rebellion. She starts interrogating Taseki, threatening him that he only has two choices before him. Either his stack could be thrown in the ocean, where he can rest in peace for eternity, a death with no pain, or he could be tortured in the infamous Circle, a torture chamber created for capital punishment in Harian. If Taseki gave them the information they needed, he could die in peace. Taseki denies any association with Kim, but proudly claims that the murders that had happened would lead human civilization to greater good. It would make Meths fear death again. Frustrated, Danica asks him about the whereabouts of the weapons he had used to destroy the backups of the Meth stack. Taseki just looks at them coldly, but doesn't say a word. Danica then orders Carrera to take Taseki to the cells for further interrogation, after which he would be sent to the Circle. Elsewhere, Poe realizes his mistake. He had forgotten to mention about the bio-tracker to Taseki. Poe concludes that, by now, Taseki must have definitely been captured by the Special Forces and must have been taken for special interrogation. He knows that these kinds of interrogations ends up with the prisoners being tortured in the Circle. Poe quickly contacts for help with the AI services, and he is guided to an archaeological AI group's gathering. The AIs that are present there are pretty rude to Poe because of the way he looks, but there is one AI that helps him out. She introduces herself as Dig 301. Poe asks for their help to rescue Taseki from the Circle. However, she reminds Poe that she has no contract binding her to Taseki, and only a human could save a human. The last bit gives Poe an idea, and he quickly goes back to the real world. Back at the prison, Carrera uses some high-tech machine to extract information from Taseki's mind, primarily about who he was and where the weapon was hidden. However, the usual force of the machine has no impact on Taseki, who is able to manipulate the images in his brain to appear as if Carrera is riding a pony, naked, angered, and embarrassed. Carrera decided to up the power of the machine, up to a point that any human would die, and he is able to retrieve two images from his brain of Quellcrest Falconer and Taseki's sister, Rylene Kawahara. Immediately, Carrera realizes that this is no ordinary man. This is the last envoy, Taseki. Elsewhere, Trep is enjoying some alone time with her wife when suddenly Poe appears. There was only one human alive that he knew, Trep, so he begs Trep to help him rescue Taseki. However, Trep has her own issues to deal with, so she doesn't agree to help. She shoos Poe off, who returns disappointed. Carrera relays the fact that their prisoner was the last envoy to Danica, but she doesn't seem to care for his reputation. Carrera tells her that Taseki is a brutal soldier, and he is capable of many atrocious things. Carrera proposes to kill the man and destroy his stack. However, Danica does not believe in the stories. She thinks that Carrera is overreacting and decides not to back away from the decision of sending Taseki to the pits. She does, however, tell him to ensure that the envoy is at a serious disadvantage when he appears in the Circle. Poe is troubled and doesn't know what he could do to help his friend. Just then, Dig 301 comes to him. She had decided that she would help him because she had nothing better to do anyway. The two decide that it's best if they can somehow malfunction the power grid of the Circle. Then they could somehow create enough distractions for Taseki to escape. The plan depended mostly on Taseki, but it was something they could work on. The two AI start working on their plan. Just before Taseki is taken to the circle, he is confronted once again by Carrera, who reveals himself to be Jaeger, the man who had raised Taseki to become the killing machine that he was. He injects Taseki with a serum that would alter his sense of reality and weaken his mind. Taseki is then taken to the circle. The circle is a large stadium where Taseki would be pitted to fight against trained soldiers and tortured to his death. There was a catch, however. The memories that were taken from him earlier were used to transform his opponents into his loved ones. This was the ultimate test of his mind. His 4 opponents from the Special Forces are told that whoever kills Taseki the quickest would be getting a new high-tech sleeve. This gets their motivation through the roof, and they quickly head for their transformation. Each of them transform into 2 of his friends, his sister and his lover. The whole city is notified that the last envoy would be killed for his crimes against the government, and all of them are requested to witness the execution of the man. Poe, Dig, Trep, and even the real Quellcrist also sees this announcement. As the battle begins between Takeshi and the Special Forces fighter, Dig and Poe manage to manipulate the power and turn it off. But it doesn't take the workers of the government to bring back the power. All of their efforts were wasted in the span of seconds. The lords and nobles of Harlan, including Danica, are rejoicing in the sport of a battle and even place bets when the last envoy would die. Round 1. 2. Danica thinks it will be round 3. The battle begins, and Takeshi reluctantly fights his close friends one by one and defeats them. But the third opponent, as Danica predicted, becomes a bit tricky. It was his sister, with whom Takeshi had a confusing relationship. He had left her, and she had become his worst enemy. And despite him loving her, she had hurt him again and again as punishment for leaving her when she wanted him the most. The woman beats him up pretty bad. Takeshi even lets her have her way with him, but just then, the real Quellcrist arrives to save him. One of the workers working the power turns out to be her supporter and turns off the power grid, allowing the duo to escape just as they were being surrounded. Carrera and his forces end up shooting their own fake Quellcrist as they were pursuing the two. Despite all odds, Takeshi had managed to hold his honor as the last envoy and escaped even the circle. Back at their home, Dig and Poe are pretty down as they couldn't save Takeshi. The two AIs even discuss if whiskey would actually make their grief a bit lighter. But just then, the door flings open and Quellcrist walks in, dragging an injured Takeshi. Danica is pretty furious that someone had managed to shame their deadliest prison and escape it right before their eyes. She had initially planned to evict the Special Forces from her planet, but now, Danica couldn't take more humiliation. She demands that Carrera take down Takeshi, no matter the cost. This was all Carrera needed, who orders his men to activate Evergreen. After some time, a still injured Takeshi wakes up and sees Quellcrist by his side. She sat beside him with a confused and scared look in her eyes. Quellcrist didn't remember who she was. She then explains that for so long she felt like someone else, as if she was trapped inside her own body and felt like someone else was in control, and that someone was who killed the Meths. She came to consciousness once she fought with Takeshi and realized that she needed to save him if she wanted to understand herself. Takeshi thanks her for saving him again and explains that they knew each other from 300 years ago, and even shows him his last sleeve, but she doesn't recognize him. This seems to bother her more than Takeshi. Takeshi then inquires about a weird symbol that she had shown him in one of his visions. Obviously, Quellcrist doesn't remember that either. The confusion is almost a hindrance to their whole being a lover thing. Takeshi decides that it's best if they leave Harlan and decides to visit Tanaseda Hideko. In the bar below, Poe and Dig realized that the government had made Takeshi's head bounty the highest in Harlan, making him a prime target of all the bounty hunters. Poe, however, is confident that no one can find them here, as the place has been scrubbed off all data records. However, Trep arrives there, almost cutting his words short. She had managed to track Poe down, as he hadn't severed their digital connection after meeting last time. She looks around and quickly finds Taseki, who was just about to leave. Poe shoots her, but she turns out to be just a holographic projection. Yet again, Poe's short memory had failed Taseki, and he cannot take it any longer. He decides to hire Dig in his position instead, and fires Poe before leaving. Elsewhere, Hideko is visited by Carrera, who knows that Hideko had been helping Taseki in his work within Harlan. The man gives Hideko a straight-faced warning that he could end his entire life if he ever decides to help Taseki again. The most open threat anyone had even managed to give Tanaseda. The old man, however, is not fazed at all. The whole planet was celebrating Harlan's day that day, the day when Danika's father had landed on the planet, with the people that inhabited the planet now. Amidst the people gathered to celebrate the occasion, Taseki manages to maneuver his way through the crowd until he is found by Trep again. At first, she points a gun to his back, but soon the two decide that words were a better plan of action instead. Trep takes him back to her place where she lives with her wife and her kid. Taseki offers her a deal. He would help her find her long-lost brother Amit, in exchange that they join forces and she not hand him over to the authorities. The two agree on the deal, and Taseki then heads to Taneseda's place, once again seeking help. Taseki asked if he could get them tickets to leave the planet that night itself, because the longer they stay would mean that they would be more risk. He also shows him the symbol that he had shown Quellcrest earlier and asks if he could translate it. Taneseda appears to know about it, but doesn't tell him anything, except that he would require the permission of Danica to get urgent tickets. Today was Harlan's day, and since the top terrorist Taseki was in the loose, the government had actually placed tight restriction to travels out of planet. He takes the paper and assures Taseki that the favor would be completed, but in return, he must prove him wrong. He must show him that his love would survive all the hardships that would follow. Back at Taseki's hideout, Poe is pretty devastated at losing his job. He is conflicted in his brain if he wants to reboot and lose all his memories, or not reboot and lose his sole purpose. Seeking some counsel, the AI approaches Quellcrest, who is currently suffering from a similar predicament. She doesn't really have any advice for the AI, but the two manage to help each other in a way. Poe gets to know that not everything has to be remembered, while Quellcrest is more intrigued to understand who she was. As Poe leaves, she asks him to show her all the data they had about her. By the time Taseki returns, Quellcrest is already lost in her research, troubled that she was a killer amongst men, a terrorist, and a really bad human being. Takeshi, however, assures her that this was all propaganda created by the Protectorate to fill the public minds with lies. She was actually a really brilliant scientist, the one who had created STAC so that humans could achieve interstellar travel. The Protectorate had misused her research and created immortality and dominance over the galaxies. This was what she had fought for so long. Quellcrest hears Taseki talk about her with such grace and remembers back when they were together. The two then end up sleeping with each other. Elsewhere for the Harlan's Day celebration, all the Meths of Harlan have been invited to a party hosted by the leader, Danica. Even one of the founders of Harlan, Dugan, had arrived personally to celebrate. Despite being a Meth, Taneseda shows up uninvited and demands that Danica give him 2 clearance tickets to urgently leave the planet. Danica simply accepts his request, Unbothered to pry in the old man's politics, Tanasita leaves an envelope with the same symbol Taseki had given him as a gift for her father, and leaves. That night, somewhere in Taseki's hideout, Dig notices Poe talking to a woman. She walks in on their conversation and realizes that she was actually a hologram. This was a memory of Poe bidding farewell to his best friends that he had wanted to keep. But now, he had decided to reboot, and these memories would all be erased. So, he was watching them one final time. Dig suddenly comes up with an idea. She was an archaeological AI who could create a system to store Poe's memories, which could be added back to him once he rebooted. This was the perfect solution, and the two AI get to work. Back in Taseki's room, Quellcris jolts up the same murderous looks in her eyes. She goes straight to Tanasita's place and makes quick work of his guards. She was intent on killing him, and right before she does so, Tanasita calls Taseki, telling him that he must forgive Quellcris for what she had done. The call cuts short, and Tanasita is confronted by his death. He is, however, at peace, and knows that he deserves what is coming his way. He bows at Quellcris and accepts her justice. The woman plunges her weapon on the back of his neck, and Tanasita dies a quick death. Taseki quickly rushes to Tanasita's place. Trep gets word of this as well, and decides to follow her new partner. Taseki reaches the place and finds that the stack of Tanasita was not yet completely destroyed. Quickly uses the memory device located there to see what Tanasita had witnessed, and realizes that Quellcris, or whoever was controlling her body, wasn't just killing random mess like a maniac. She was going after the Founders, the first people to leave a dying Earth and arrive at Harlan, the first mess to have abused her research to become immortal. But they could realize it. Dugan was dead as well. Quellcris was on a roll. Subscribe and hit that like button to help grow our channel. And don't forget to click the notification icon so you won't miss any of our new videos. Thanks for watching.